Well, hello. Thank you so much for coming out. I know we'd all much rather be sunbathing outside right now. And it is my distinct pleasure to introduce J.K. Simmons, who you just saw in a very remarkable movie, Whiplash. So if I could get possibly a drum roll.
Thank you. Thank you. It's like being back in the theater.
Well, now, I want to talk about the short film that you made before making Whiplash, but before we get into that, I am so struck by one of the words that a lot of people are using to describe this movie is visceral. And I'm so interested to hear how it reads on page.
Well, visceral. Viscerally. Miles and I had this discussion many times. Miles Teller, by the way. I think if he had been perceived as having paid his dues, he'd be getting a much more sort of individual attention than he is, because he deserves it. But anyway, we talked during the shoot and at a lot of these kinds of events afterwards about everything that we did was on the page, and we both felt like our job was just to lift what Damien had written off the page and get out of the way and not screw it up, because it was such a mature and a complete piece of writing that again, the story was all there, and all we had to do was try and get it right.
Did you have a physical reaction? Because I had a very physical reaction watching the movie. Was that there when you read the script?
Yeah, reading the script. Yeah, I mean, it was like, the pulse quickened, and I mean, I hope the script is published someday and available to be read, because it's as you know, reading scripts is something I'm still working on figuring out how to do well for my own purposes. But there's so much entertainment and enlightenment to be had reading the script, whether it's Damien's or God, if you're ever lucky enough, a Coen Brothers script, which is it's a laugh riot without even reading the dialogue. And I think that Damien the boy wonder Chazelle is very accomplished at that, and fortunately also accomplished at taking it from the page to the stage.
Well, now to go back to the original short film, what got you interested in doing the short film with Damien?
Well, I had sent Jason Reitman, thank you, sent me the script for both the short and the feature, because Damien had written it originally as a feature. It's largely autobiographical. He was a drummer. The environment was high school, but a sort of highly competitive music program. The script came from Jason, so I knew it was worth reading and was going to be interesting at least. And he sent both the feature and the short. Damien had written it as a feature-length film. He'd been trying to get it made and going around, and he was, connected enough to be getting meetings with some important people. And everywhere he went, they weren't going to sink $2 or $3 million into a movie about a jazz drummer that ends with a 12-minute drum solo. So he and after Jason and his partner Helen Esterbrook, his producing partner, got on board, and Cooper Samuelson, they were throwing around ideas. How can we get funding for this movie? And they decided to do the short film as a sort of proof of concept. So we did the short film 2.5 years ago with a different actor playing Andrew. Johnny Simmons, who was wonderful in a different way than Miles is brilliant. A different character, but really wonderful. And we shot 3 days. We shot the short film in 3 days, and they took it to Sundance, and it won awards and got a lot of attention, and got the money for enough money for a 19-day shoot, which is how long this took. I love that. I love when a knowledgeable audience hears that fact. It's unbelievable. I mean, 19 days with a young filmmaker, it's crazy.
Did it help that you'd already done some preparation for the short film?
Well, it helped me a little bit. I mean, in a way, it was sort of surreal and almost off-putting because I was doing the same dialogue and then the same thing with with a different actor, and it was 15 months later. The big advantage of doing the short film for me first was, when I met Damien, I had read the script. I was in love with the character and with the story, and I knew I wanted to do it. And by that time, Damien knew that he wanted me to do it. It was Jason Reitman again who had suggested me for the part. My concern was when I first met him. Well, here's a stupid story. I read the script and I thought, this is a guy who gets everything, and one of the things that he really gets is jazz music. I read the name Damien Chazelle. For whatever reason, my brain goes Antoine Fuqua. So this is what I'm visualizing when I'm thinking Damien Chazelle wrote this awesome movie about jazz. And we go and they set up a meeting, and we're going to get together and have lunch at the Daily Grill in Studio City. And I walk in, and I'm looking around for Damien Chazelle, and of course he knows what I look like. And there's this like nerdy curly-haired white boy from Jersey standing up going, and I go, what? Really? Okay. And honestly, looked like he was 18 years old. I think he was all of 25 or 6. So we sit down, we're talking about the movie. The first two things that he wanted to talk about, I hope you didn't have any more questions, because I'm just going to... The first two things that he wanted to talk about was he wanted to put me at ease about the musical aspects of the movie and didn't want me to be intimidated by, by the conducting, and said, we'll have a technical advisor and we'll, we can fake a lot of it. We can use a body double for some of the conducting if you need to. And I said, well, dude, I actually have a degree in music and I studied conducting, and I thought I was going to be Leonard Bernstein when I grew up, so don't worry about that. And the next thing we talked about was that we were on the same page about wanting the film to end climactically, but also ambiguously, so that I didn't want. It was very important to me, if I was going to be a part of telling this story, that I didn't want to dictate to the audience how they were supposed to feel about this. That the thing I loved about the script and that I love about the finished product is that it inspires this debate, and it doesn't say, Fletcher's, yes, this is okay that he does this, or no, Fletcher is evil and hateful, and you cannot push people like that. People come down on both sides of that debate. I got an email from a professional symphony orchestra conductor recently saying, who totally was right in Fletcher's corner for the whole movie. I didn't ask him about the chair throwing, but he was like, yes, I'm so glad that somebody is showing this, I was like, dude, all right. I'm glad I don't play the cello in your orchestra, but... Did I answer a question in there somewhere?
You answered half my questions. I think we only need 5 more minutes.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, since you brought up the debate, I'm interested about how you approach a character like this without judging him in any way.
Well, to me, to play any character, whether it's a villain or any character, if it's not something that I can understand and find a way to empathize with where he's coming from, then it's not something I can play, And obviously, the pedagogy here, the methodology is extreme, but I understood. This is a guy who has a clear goal and a clear passion, and that I understood. And I think that's all for me as an actor. That's all that's necessary for me to be able to work my way into a guy's psyche.
Does something click for you when you realize that there is something that you can relate to in a character?
Literally from the beginning, from page 1 on. I mean, I just read the script and went, yep, yep. It was like, oh God, more meat. This is brilliant. This is beautiful. This is, and there wasn't. Everything. The answer is everything.
Well, and you were talking about Damien being so young. Are young directors people that you look to work with?
I mean, not necessarily, not yes or no, really. But that was another thing. Doing the short really gave me the confidence because meeting him and talking to him and reading his script. I mean, there's a lot of great writers out there. That doesn't mean they can direct, and a lot of people talk a good game, but can they deliver? So doing the short film with him, which was a very small commitment, I mean, it was learning some music and then doing a 3-day shoot. That really gave me a level of confidence in him as a it's an overused word, but visionary, and as a guy who really understands remarkably well all aspects of filmmaking, whether it's dealing with actors. His visual sense obviously is brilliant. His musicianship, I mean, he had absolutely everything that a director needed to make this movie.
When you were filming, I'm curious about how your reaction to the character or your approach to the character changed between that first read, doing the short, and then eventually getting to do the feature all those years later.
It didn't fundamentally at all. I think it only changed. The short film was basically Andrew's first day in studio band that begin, and it gets the chair throwing and the slapping and all of that, and the short began with the shot of my feet walking into studio band, and then ended with me saying, "Neiman, you need to practice harder," and here we go, whiplash from the top. And yet somehow that was also a climactic ending. There were certainly many different moments because I was responding to what Miles was giving me rather than what Johnny was giving me. But in terms of where I was coming from, it was just doing the short just sort of affirmed to me that what I read on the page was what I wanted to try to portray.
Well, having that time between the short and the feature, did new things come to you about the character? Were you thinking about, did things make sense in a way that they hadn't, or different sense in a way that they hadn't before?
Well, things, for me at least, things always come, on the day, when you're on set and when you're seeing what the other actors are giving you, So there wasn't, like during that 15 months or whatever it was, I wasn't spending a lot of time, ruminating about the character. I mean, I was, trying to work for a living and get other jobs. And while we're talking about that briefly, just I'm so blessed, first of all, to be doing what I do for a living, period. And second of all, to have had the opportunity to play this character in this film. And after Jason and Helen suggested me for this part and we did the short film, then they got the money, then they got all this attention, and then, every agent in Hollywood was pitching their high-profile movie star clients to play this part because it's a great, great part. And I appreciate so much that Damien stuck to his guns and as a young guy who's getting a budget to make his first movie, he stood by me, and I appreciate that.
Well, what was the mood like on set with this intense material and such a compressed shooting schedule? It
was surprisingly well. Miles says it's a lot easier to be exhausted than act exhausted. So for him, I think by the last week it was helping. I mean, it was crazy schedule, and obviously more so for Miles and Damien and the whole crew than for me. I mean, I actually had 2 days off during this shoot. If you'll notice, the whole movie is Miles Teller and Andrew Neiman and his perspective. And we did shoot a half a day of stuff, my character at home alone and my character in other environments that ended up being cut from the film because Damien wanted to see Fletcher only from Andrew's perspective and to leave him sort of enigmatic and more mysterious as to why this guy is the way he is. And now I forget the question.
The mood on the set.
The mood on the set was shockingly goofy, and it was. And this was nothing that was discussed. We didn't rehearse. There was no time or money for rehearsal. We just went in and started making the movie, and Miles and I just immediately settled into this rhythm of playing the scenes and ramping up the intensity, and as soon as Damien said cut, we just started goofing around like a couple of knucklehead eighth graders and having fun and keeping the set light. And it wasn't a conscious effort. It wasn't like this is going to be a tough schedule. We got to help the crew have fun. It was just, it was just the way we naturally settled into it. And every time I make that statement, I feel like, there are plenty of actors that I've worked with and plenty of wonderful actors that I've worked with or seen their work who need to stay much more in character, and if you're playing that level of intensity, who need to then sort of keep that going, all day long or all through whatever weeks of a shoot, and I completely respect that. And if Miles had been that kind of actor, then I would have absolutely gone along with it. But to me, it's more fun to just, it's a long day. Let's lighten up and have fun and go to Crafty, Love David, by the way. Crafty was awesome on this movie, given his limited budget.
So were you able to leave Fletcher on the set? You didn't take him home?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, part of that is, I've been doing this a while. When I was doing Oz, back in the day in New York, the first season of that show, for example, it was tough to shed that skin at the end of the day, and I did, and it was tough on my wife, who was doing Beauty and the Beast on Broadway at the time, so it's kind of a different vibe, But I mean, I think I've just I've just gotten more comfortable and more able to see the work, do the work, and then get back to real life.
Well, and a lot of people are talking about what a physical movie this is, and certainly Miles' performance is extremely physical, but you also have a really arresting physicality here. How did that come about? Was that something that you consciously
It was just my natural awesome buffness, I think. Thank you. Part of that was coincidence. Part of that was a few years before this film, I was in less than ideal shape, and I did a film where the director wanted me to get like obese and horrible, and I did, like a dumbass. So about 2 years before, or a year or 2 years before we first met to do the short, I lost like 60 pounds and got back to the gym and started taking care of myself again. And Damien and I talked about that again the first time we sat down, about how Fletcher is a guy that that relies on his intimidation of these young musicians, and part of that is physicality, and also just to be a guy that has the physical stamina and strength and agility to work those days and lead the jazz band. And so it was a combination of things, and yeah, I mean, and part of it is just ego too, I mean, I I wanted to do a movie where I look at, all right, here's the thing, I did a movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger in the meantime, the next Terminator movie. And I was talking to him, I don't know, whatever, a month ago, because we hang out now. And I went fishing for this. I mean, he didn't just offer it, but he had just seen the movie, and he was like most people who are smart, loved it, and was talking about how wonderful the film was. And I said, what do you think about my biceps, huh? And he said, the biceps were okay. Your triceps were extraordinary. I'll take it.
Well, after 19 days of shooting, will you ever be able to wear a black T-shirt again?
You know what? I wear here. One of the few things that sort of differed from what Damien put on the page was he'd written a different specific wardrobe for Fletcher on the page. Similar concept, you know, very together, very sort of, you know, precise and always the same, you know. But I just pitched the idea of the sort of, you know, Jack LaLanne goes to music school. You know, partly out of that conversation that he and I had about you know, wanting to be sort of physically intimidating, and partly because, look, I'm pushing 60, and this might be the last time I look halfway decent. I want to get it up on the big screen, you know. So that's how the black T-shirt thing ended up. I just had this image of this guy as, like, if you open the closet in his Spartan apartment, you know, you would see like 10 black T-shirts and 4 black suits and 2 pairs of shoes, and you know, that would be it.
Well, you filmed scenes in his apartment. Was that what the set design was like?
Well, we didn't see the closet, but yeah, it was the apartment was, you know, immaculate, you know, nice, but not obviously overly expensive. You know, a nice, you know, 1-bedroom Manhattan walk up, you know, brownstone looking kind of place, and yeah, very spare, very sparse. And the main sequence that we shot was kind of a montage of, you know, me eating dinner alone, having a glass of red wine, and eating very healthy food, but like out of a, you know, frozen thing from, you know, Whole Foods. There was a slight reference to, you know, I went over and picked up a glass of wine off of a table, and there was a picture of a mother and child on the table, and that was it. You know, we never referred to it again, so it was like, okay, what happened there? Who is that? How does that contribute to why he's such a nasty mother? And then we shot me in my living room, putting on an old jazz album, which was where I got my oldest friend in the world's name into the movie. That this is the only thing that pissed me off that Damien cut. My friend that I went to junior high with, who's a veterinarian in Orofino, Idaho, and he wanted me to put this album on the, you know, old-fashioned turntable, and the album, the label was blank. You know, he said put whatever you want in there, you know, whatever moves you, for the name of the song and the name of the artist. So I put Paul Lang on there and the name of the tune, and it was the same tune that I play in the jazz club. And the name of the tune was that I decided was "It's You," which sounded sort of vaguely romantic and wistful, and he did a close up on that as I was putting it on the turntable, and then we saw Fletcher just, you know, sit back in the chair, you know, take a sip of his red wine, and just like disappear into the music, and weep ultimately, just that sort of joy that you can get when you're immersed in any kind of deep aesthetic experience, you know, and saw a side of him that was, you know, didn't sort of explain or justify anything he does, but sort of went, wow, this guy's deep.
Well, to go back to that photo that was on the table, when you get on set and you see details like that, or you put on that black T-shirt for the first time, is there a moment of recognition? Is there a moment that makes you tweak the character in some small way?
Yeah, I mean, it informs it. Actually, the photo I brought myself because it was my wife and kid. My wife and our daughter when she was a baby. But yeah, those kinds of things. I'll tell you what, hearing that tune for the first time, Justin Hurwitz, by the way, is the composer of most of the original music in the film. He and Damien were college roommates, so he is also a child. And his training isn't even jazz. He's a classical musician. And most of the original music that you hear in the film was written by him. Yes. Did I answer the question? I didn't yet, did I?
I mean, informing the character, costumes.
Yeah, no,
sets.
there are always little things like that. I'm trying to think of another example. And oftentimes it's just, one of the things I loved about how Damien composed this film is even though we've already met Fletcher in the very opening scene, you know, where I emerge from the fog, you know, sort of. In the studio band scene, you know, he tells so much about my character by living on the faces of the musicians. You know, all these you know 19, 20, 21-year-old kids who you know who want to make the big time and who are here because this guy is a guy who can help get them there. But they're just scared shitless of him, you know, and everybody in that room is just like, you know, please God, don't look at me, don't, you know, don't pick me out. And those guys, by the way, all those guys are musicians, and every time we were shooting the band scenes, we were actually playing and actually making music, and what you hear is sweetened in the final mix, but it's a rare music movie where, you know, I mean, there were one or two exceptions, but virtually all the time that you're seeing guys playing those instruments, those guys are playing those instruments.
So what was your reaction when you walked into that scene the first time and you saw all of their faces with those hangdog terrified expressions?
Well, I didn't see them. I mean, literally, because I didn't see them until I saw the movie put together. Because, you know, I just walked into the room, hung up my jacket, did my thing, blah, 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 here's the music, and then you know, looked up at them and said, you know, let's start, you know, whatever the line was, whatever we were doing. So when I saw their faces, they were just very attentively looking at me, waiting to see what I was going to say. And it was awesome, because most of those guys weren't, I mean, some of them were actors, you know, musicians who were also actors, but a lot of them were just guys that just, you know, just got the vibe. And guys who had played in jazz bands and maybe had teachers that they were a little intimidated by. And I mean, there's, you know, that whole vibe of who this guy is not, it's not an exaggeration. I mean, this exists in well, in a lot of worlds, but certainly in the jazz world. Just ask anybody that ever knew Buddy Rich.
Were they coming up to you sharing stories between takes?
Yeah, definitely. Well, and one of the guys in the short was a kid who had played in Damien's high school band, you know, and he didn't know the script or anything, but he, you know, after we did, you know, the first couple of takes, he walked up to Damien and he goes, "Oh, this is Mr. What? Oh my God! I can't believe you have the balls to do that."
Well, with the shoot this short, how early did you get the music? Did you have any time to prepare before you got to set?
Yeah, and that was you know, once we actually, you know, had a schedule, and as usual, you know, we have a schedule and then it gets pushed and then, you know, blah blah blah. But when we actually were going to go to work, the first thing I asked the production office for was you know, I need the music, and then finally somebody sent me the MP3s of and I was like, no, I need the music, I need the, you know, the score, because I'm the conductor and I, you know, that's, you know, what I'm interpreting, and yeah, I mean, I didn't really feel the need to do any sort of preparation, you know, emotionally or you know, to play the character, to play the scenes. For me, all the preparation was getting that little piano ditty under my fingers, because I'm not any good on the piano, and just learning those scores inside out, so that I wish I could say I was you know, 100% successful. I was 75% successful for my own purposes, in being believable in conducting you know, every measure of all those. There's some complex tunes in that movie, and a lot of 7/4, and one of the tunes that was written by our other composer, Tim Simonek. He said, "Damien told me to write something hard," and that's the one that Miles, that Andrew's character crashes and burns with in Carnegie Hall, that I sabotage him with. That was the one that he said, "Just write something hard." It's called Upswinging.
And did you appreciate that?
Well, it was hard.
Well, so you didn't have to audition for this. You got to take a meeting with Damien. Is that true more now?
Well, I'll tell you what, I've been feeling what my wife and I have coined the whiplash effect since this film. I mean, you know, it sort of had been gradually happening, you know, as the years went by. You know, I was auditioning less and being offered things and meeting with people, and since this film has come out and everybody in the business is seeing it, I'm finding a number of opportunities coming my way. Well, the door was sort of ajar before, and this has really kicked it open, and I'm getting in much earlier on projects, and you know, big movies and independent films, and getting to be a collaborator very early in the process, like I was on this film, and it's that's really the most gratifying part of, aside from having made what I am truly proud of as, I think, a wonderful movie. You know, the ongoing benefit is that, you know, more wonderful things are coming my way. Thanks.
Well, speaking of that collaborative environment, I read in an interview with Damien that he said you created one of the most vicious insults in the movie when you separate drummers from the rest of the musicians.
Yeah, of course, Damien's a drummer. Yeah, I did. I had to take, well, that's another thing about Damien. You know, he wrote this impeccable, brilliant script, but, you know, and this was more than you might expect from a young, you know, a first-time feature writer-director. He was not at all precious with the words, and he allowed us, Miles and myself and all the actors, Paul and Melissa and Nate, everybody, the freedom to go off the script and to bring our own things to it. And what you see in the film is, you know, 95% what Damien wrote, but the opportunities that we took to go off the map, and you know, when he found something, he was always very open to hearing what we had to bring to it, and didn't let his ego get in the way of going, oh, yeah, that's good, let's use that.
Well, other than that, was there something else that you brought in that he kept?
Yeah, I mean, self-righteous little prick, for example. I mean, most of those streams of you know, spewing epithets are directly from the twisted mind of Damien Chazelle. But yeah, I mean, I don't remember other specific examples, but it was great to have that, to have such a rock solid script, but then to also have the freedom to you know, to bring your own ideas to it.
Is that something you feel comfortable doing if the director's on board, coming up with ideas and pitching them?
Yeah, and more, you know. I mean, when I first started, I did theater for 20 years, and then I've been doing film for 20 years, and it's like two totally separate, you know, careers that I've had. When I first started doing film, and I went to the set, there was a movie called The Ref, and I went to the set for rehearsal. Good movie, yeah, Ted Demme. And then rehearsal was, you know, okay, the camera's here, hit your mark, blah, blah, blah. Okay, let's go, you know, we'll see you in 45 minutes and we'll shoot it. And I was like, what? That, you know, now, more and more, you know, all these years later, that was when I was doing Guys and Dolls on Broadway, actually. That was like 92 or something, my first movie. And I was really nervous and terrified about the lack of rehearsal, and always, you know, always adhered to the script exactly, because that's what I did when I was doing, you know, Shakespeare or Frank Lesser or you know, whoever it was. And as I've become more comfortable, and as I've done some, you know, television shows with episode after episode after episode after episode, I've felt much more comfortable, you know, improving and ad-libbing and just you know, tweaking the script a little bit when that's appropriate to the environment. Yeah. Which, like with Oz, for example, it was. With Law and Order, it was not. With Law and Order, the script was a Bible, and with Oz, you know, Tom Fontana was open to some of us at least, you know, bringing our own ideas to it.
Well, with the whiplash effect in effect, what gets you to say yes to projects?
The same thing, mostly the same things that I always have, which is a character that I can understand in a story that I find compelling. And it's not, I mean, I usually say the script, but I mean, I've signed on to do a big giant movie that starts in July, and there is no script yet. there was one other actor attached who is a guy that Tom Hiddleston, who's a wonderful actor that I'm excited to work with. Yeah, and I met with the director, and we talked concept and this and that. I was pretty skeptical going in, but I saw a passion and an intelligence and a thoroughness in his pitch that I really admired. And then there are some indie films that I'm trying to work out that I hope to be doing where I'm being invited again very early stages with no other cast attached, with just a script, where I'm sort of collaborating with ideas on the script much earlier in the process. So but at the end of the day, I want to tell a story that I think is somebody's vision that I think I have a grasp on, and that I feel like I can be a good contributing part of, because there are wonderful things that I read that I think are really great, but I don't feel like I'm the right guy for. Just because I like something and appreciate something doesn't mean that I feel like I can do it. I learned that off and on many times over the years, but one time memorably was with David Milch show, Bochco's, the guy, NYPD Blue, and I think originally Hill Street Blues, maybe, or that was Bochco anyway. And I've always loved what those guys did together and what all those actors did, and Dennis Franz and Jimmy Smits, and I really loved those shows. And when I had an opportunity to get into a room with David Milch for a new show, and this is 12, 13, 14 years ago, I was in the room with him and realizing I can't do this. This is not, I get it, but I can't, it's not coming out. I'm not making it happen. I'm just not, this is not one of the arrows in my quiver. I don't have it. I recognize it, I understand it, I appreciate it intellectually, but I'm not the guy. And they didn't have to tell me that.
Well, and last question, for a room full of people, many of whom have just seen Whiplash for the first time, I'm curious about your reaction when you saw the finished product for the first time.
Well, there were two, because when I saw the short for the first time, that was the time when I realized Damien Chazelle is a shot maker and a storyteller, and this kid is, we're going to be seeing his films for the next 50 or 60 years, and or however long we're around. And he's just, a brilliant, wonderful filmmaker. The first time I saw the feature was the first time in my life that I ever went to Cannes, and it was the director's fortnight, big blah screening at the Cannes Film Festival in a gigantic auditorium with, 1,800 people, packed, and the audience went berserk and would not shut up, and applauded all the way through the credits. And Damien and I were there. Miles wasn't able to be there. And not only did I have the pleasure of watching that film unfold with this audience of French cinephiles, but then and just having it wash over me in a way that whatever, you just saw it. But then to get that level of reaction to it is, quite aside from the obvious ego stroke that is, was just, just an amazing experience. And it's so great to share that with the boy wonder, too. That was cool.
All right. And thank you, J.K. Simmons. Thank you all for coming out tonight. Everyone get home safely and warmly.
Thank you.